We want to thank you for taking the time to join us today for the Plus Group webinar series. Today's topic is Express Standard Issue Solution. Our presenter is Bryan Orr, National Sales Manager at Mutual of Omaha. Please note that all lines will be muted during this presentation. If you'd like to ask a question, go to your question pane on the control panel and type it in. We will answer the questions at the end of the webinar. Also, please note that we are recording this, and it will be sent to you tomorrow as a link and in a follow-up email. All right, everyone, now I'm going to turn this over to Bryan.
Great. Thank you very much, Tracy, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As Tracy mentioned, I am going to take about 15-20 minutes. We're going to talk a little bit about disability income insurance and some concepts as it pertains to Express Standard Issue, which is unique to Mutual of Omaha, ways to get into the multi-life opportunities that you may come up against in the marketplace. And so we want to focus on disability income protection, especially as we talk about this. This is going to be focusing into what we like to call the middle market. And again, we hear a lot, what is this middle market? Well, middle market is typically going to be anyone in the $100,000 salary range or less. Or as we're going to talk about, really, when you go in and if you're doing carve-outs with companies for executives, the middle market is going to be everyone else that may work at that particular company. People that are not really the highly paid executives or the key employees, but everyone else that may need income protection. And so when we talk about this middle market, the middle market is really, we have quite a bit of risk tolerance in that marketplace. So we have folks that are looking at something like disability income protection saying, well, you know what, that sounds great, but sounds expensive, and I am just ready to take my chances as it comes to protection of my income in the case of illness or injury. So the obstacles that we have with the risk tolerance is obviously a lack of awareness of what's out there, especially with ESI programs, which culminates into fear of how to have some sort of protection for one's income, or afraid to broach the subject of such an emotional type of vulnerability. And that also lends to, and we're going to talk about a lot of this today, is how is the client perceiving the product that you're talking to them about. So when we talk about the traditional DI space, which is physicians, highly paid executives, attorneys, their perception of the value of this plan is very high because they know that they need this type of protection. They know they're maxing out of any kind of group plan. Whereas in the risk tolerant have a skewed perception of value. They think that the product is too expensive for them, and they have a skewed perception of how to qualify for this product. So we want to make sure we're taking those obstacles and trying to overcome those in our conversation today. And most of that conversation is going to talk about taking the onesie, twosie opportunity and making that move into the multi-life options that you may have to overcome objections. We're going to put that into practice, talking about a tax gap plan, how to protect one's income in the case that taxation erodes away benefits. And then we want to focus on, just kind of even on the basics if we have time here, to really focus on just how are we quoting the people in this middle market? Are we looking at the right policy for right now for individuals? So we get started and we look at the advantages of moving into, pivoting the conversation into multi-life. So if you have an individual and they're looking for disability income, and we're finding that there is a gap in their coverage as far as protecting their income, that major asset that they have. Typically, if there's going to be that gap for them, there's going to be a gap for pretty much everyone that they work with, because most of their coverage is going to come from their employer, and if there's a gap or a hole in coverage from the employer, then we have the opportunity to say, look, if this is bad for you, can we go and see if it's bad for everyone else? Or do you have a contact at your employer to be able to go and talk about a multi-life opportunity where we offer this to all employees? The advantages to that, obviously, is now we can overcome the conversation of cost because we have discounts on these plans up to 20-25%. We also have unisex rates. So if we have females at these opportunities, they would get another discount basically because we're taking their normally high premium and bringing it down to a unisex rate. We also have the opportunity for streamlined underwriting, which we're going to talk about with ESI especially. We're going to talk about this where, how do we shorten the health question process for underwriting, and how do we help them overcome their skewed perception of how to qualify for this plan. One advantage is you can do a list bill for these opportunities, or you can do individual billing on the individuals on a multi-line. There are a lot of companies, especially small businesses, that say, well, payroll deduction is fine, but we're really not into doing that. And that's fine. We have flexible options for them. And it's also an opportunity for you to go back and have this chance to enroll more people at these employers on an ongoing basis. So as new people come on, you can enroll them into the plan, and every year you can go back and say who hasn't chosen to be a part of this plan and who would like to choose it now. So I have many producers that I work with that just have opportunities every year that they can go back and do another enrollment of this plan, especially for ESI. So what do I mean when I say ESI? Well, Express Standard Issue is a way to have a minimal amount of underwriting, health underwriting, on either a voluntary or employer-paid basis. The reason why it says voluntary here is because it's the most common way that this is sold. It's a voluntary multi-life opportunity where one can get income protection that is determined by Mutual of Omaha Home Office based off of a census that would have information on income, age, location of where they work, etc. So that they come up with the maximum amount that would be eligible for what's called Express Standard Issue. This Express Standard Issue would be a percentage of income replacement based off of the parameters of the census that we would receive. And in order to qualify, to get this to be a qualified product or a good case, the only thing that would be needed is a minimum of 5 lives or 10% participation in the plan, whichever is larger. Normally in the voluntary marketplace, you're required to get 20, 30% participation. But here, you can get as low as 10% participation, and it's still a valid opportunity. You can get up to a 20% discount on policies written with through this program. And the nice thing is that you have a knockout application. So there's one GSI question. Have you been able to perform the material and substantial duties of your occupation within the last 6 months? And then 6 additional knockout underwriting questions. By that I mean if they say yes to these 6 other health questions, they would be knocked out of the policy or not get coverage. An advantage to this is this empowers you to be able to go to an employer and say, I can take applications today, and we will know absolutely whether someone can get coverage or not as I'm taking the application, instead of, well, I'm not sure, I'll take the application now, submit it to underwriting, we'll see if we get coverage under the fully underwritten method. So, if you can get a census for an employer, if you work with employer groups, this is a great way to get into that voluntary market where the participation is much lower. Now, another advantage to this is we do have guaranteed standard issue, which has the typical requirements of a minimum of 10 lives or 30% participation, up to a 25% discount. Typically, we see GSI on an employer-paid basis because we want to get the participation in there. But you can also do it voluntary if you feel comfortable that you're going to get 30% participation. But one advantage that a lot of producers go forward with is that with ESI, you can start a program by saying, okay, I need to get 5 lives or 10% participation and use the ESI applications. They do the 7 questions. If you happen to get 30% participation on those applications, then underwriting only looks at the one guaranteed issue underwriting question. So you could start out as an ESI program, and if you get 30% participation, underwriting will ignore 6 of the underwriting questions and just pay attention to the one question, which is, have you been able to perform the material and substantial duties of your occupation within the last 6 months? So you could start as ESI and get a post-enrollment guaranteed issue if you get 30% participation. That is a very popular method that people use with these programs, because you'll want to start with, on a voluntary basis with a low amount of pressure on you to try to get participation. And then when you go out and try to get that 30% and you get it, it's a reward, a guaranteed issue policy. So I do recommend that, and it's one of our most popular methods as far as people using multi-life, is going in and getting the ESI, starting with ESI on a voluntary basis, trying to get 30% participation so it ends up being guaranteed issue. Now, how do we put this what's an example of putting this into practice? The example I always use is when someone says, I have coverage with my employer. Well, that's fantastic, because we want to ask the right follow-up questions, say, what kind of coverage is this that you have with your employer, and is it adequate? Because typically if we ask these types of probing questions, we're going to get the answer that they have group LTD protection, and that's good. That's good because group LTD is typically owned by the employer, not the individual. It is typically has a salary replacement percentage with a monthly benefit maximum. And the coverage is paid by employer. The benefit is typically taxed. So how do we put that into a visual perspective? If I'm in Chicago, I make $70,000 a year, and I have a group LTD of 60% to $5,000 in this example. I'm used to taking home $4,500 a month based on Illinois taxes and federal taxes. I'm already pretty hand-to-mouth. I'm living in Chicago, and I'm taking home $4,500 a month. So if I'm telling my producer I get 60% of my income replaced, and it's 60% to $5,000, I think I'm getting $3,500. What I'm actually doing, because that is a tax benefit, is getting $2,800 in benefit. Now, going from $4,500 to $2,800 is a challenge at best. So what do? We do an ESI program through that entire employer for $1,000 of coverage over the top of the net group basis, which you can do. You can stack individual on top of group and put that in place so that you can talk to folks and say, hey, let's offer this up to everyone at that employer, because they're all going to see this opportunity or this gap if the benefits from group are not bonused up or something like that. What are the advantages of doing this? Well, one is obviously you're just fulfilling the client's salary expectations that they already think they have, 60% income replacement. We're overcoming cost because $1,000 a month individual plan is a very low cost to the client to get comprehensive coverage that is, employer subsidied up to a certain point. And this plan is typically a simplified underwriting process, just an application, and depending on the benefit period, and either an application and a phone interview at best for the underwriting process, and it's over. And that's going to help either supplement the existing core products that you do with clients, so you can help go back and look at cases that you've written with your core products and try to add this on, or it opens up the door for you to use DI as a door opener, and ESI as a door opener, and then add to the discussion of saying, hey, how about these core products that I use as well? So that's how to pivot the conversation to multi-life. But let's say we don't pivot it to multi-life and we keep it at the onesie, twosie kind of level. The one thing that I want to make sure we know is if we are looking at an individual in the middle market, middle area salary, here's an example, 40-year-old male, restaurant manager in Chicago, that'd be a 3A occupation class, $50,000 a year in salary. Are we quoting this type of individual correctly? What we typically do is we'll get a quote and we'll just go for the maximum amount. So $2,900 a monthly benefit, all the maximum levels as far as benefit. And, this is an actual rate for Illinois. It comes out at $131 a month. And we wonder why we're not writing more DI in the middle market. Well, we're asking someone making $50,000 a year to pay $131 a month for income protection. That's not going to work. But if we simply change that to a 5-year benefit period from 2867, that now gets to a $79 a month cost, which is much more manageable for an individual. And then if we have the conversation to say, is $2,900 a month really the level that we need to see to maintain a household? Could we do this at $2,000 a month, 5-year benefit period? Now we get it down to $52 a month. So what we've done here is every quote, we show a good, better, best example of how we quote the risk tolerant or the middle market. We don't just spreadsheet the maximum amount. That's what we do for doctors, attorneys, and highly comp, and that's fine. But for the risk tolerant that are already on the fence about whether they even need this protection, a good, better, best example is always the best way to kind of approach it. And then the bottom line is to say, look, even if this isn't in your value equation, you have to admit if you left my office today that if you were to get in an accident and couldn't work, you would need to have some kind of protection. Let's at least give you the right policy for right now, which would be an accident only, $2,900 a month, 14-day waiting period, and a 2-year benefit period is now $42 a month. So we're giving them now a spectrum of cost that I promise you will close more deals in the middle market for DI because we're simply not showing them this shock cost, which has them walk away from the table every time. So those are kind of the main points I wanted to make sure to hit. I usually talk about getting cases through underwriting. I think we all kind of know this for DI. The bottom line is that you need to make sure that the story is good for the individual. You got to have a good story for the individual. And that means medical history. We need to know everything about a medical history. Just because someone qualifies for top level in a life insurance policy does not mean that they're even going to get a disability policy. You need to make sure we know job duties versus just job title. You need to know everything that an individual does, especially in the middle market, because it could be a high risk. What is considered income? Earned income is covered. Unearned income is not. If they're getting income that they would get whether they're disabled or not, they're not going to be taken into consideration. And really always set realistic expectations with the client. Always talk to the client and say, look, this is, you are applying for a job. You're applying for a job in case you are injured or ill, you're going to get an income. So much like with a job interview or a job qualification process, it is drawn out and long, and you need to be accepted by this group. So that's going to be an important part about getting through the disability underwriting part. So that's my section. I hope we have a lot of good questions, and I'm ready to hear them.
Again, if you have a question, please go to your control panel and the question pane and type them in. Again, if you have any questions, go to your control panel where it says question, and you can type them in. Bryan, maybe you just did such a great job that you answered everything that anyone had.
That happens a lot.
Again, any last questions? Well, it doesn't look like there are any. So, Bryan, thank you for your time, and thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, this has been recorded, and you will receive a link by tomorrow sent to you. And if you have any more questions or comments, please contact your local Plus Group office, or you can visit our website at www.plusgroupunus.com. Again, Bryan, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.